As police are still investigating the murder of Warwick Stock, known as DJ Waras, after what looks like a hit on his life in the Joburg CBD yesterday. It's understood he was conducting an investigation of a hijacked building. His private security company was supposed to be providing services there when he was shot dead. But, as you probably know, there are around 600,000 private security guards in South Africa, and many of them often publicly display high-powered firearms. Willem Els is the training coordinator at the Institute for Security Studies. Willem, good morning. Thank you for your time. We seem to have so many private security companies in South Africa. I realise there's a formal industry, but in the last decade or so, it seems that there have been a lot more. Where have they all come from? Why are there so many?
Good morning to you, Stephen. Yes, indeed. Unfortunately, that is the situation that we are finding in ourselves in nowadays. Is because of the crumbling nature of our law and order pillar. We had to rely more and more on private security companies. Our people were actually willing to fork out more money in order to pay for their security, and that led to this mushrooming of lots of these different companies. Now, what we see is, of course, the legislation that is actually governing them is in place. It is. They also have to register with CIRA, and under that, between the CIRA, the legislation there, and also the firearm legislation, these companies have then access to firearms under certain conditions. The legislation is pretty good. There are some loopholes, etc., etc. But what we see and what we notice in recent years is that your enforcement and your governance of the parties by CIRA is not what it's supposed to be.
Okay, so as I understand it, an individual, this is my understanding of the law, yours will be better than mine, I, Stephen Grootes, can't go out and buy a machine gun. I can get a license for a handgun, but I can't go and buy a machine gun. And yet so many of these guards have guns like that, and that is through the security company. How is the law supposed to work relating to these weapons?
Yeah, there are certain clauses there and certain conditions. You're right when you say that you cannot buy an automatic firearm. That firearm is being regulated to the state, the police, the military, as well as in certain circumstances, your private security due to the nature of their work. And that is also, if you look at, for instance, your cash and transit heist, where they come up 20 to 30 plus of these perpetrators, they are armed with these high-powered firearms. And in order to counter them, then the security also have to have something similar in order to protect themselves and to enforce their jurisdiction there. So that is a challenge that we are facing with. I think the challenge is, as I mentioned, at CIRA, and CIRA is the governing body that is they're supposed to do inspections. They're supposed to register all these people. They're supposed to go and visit them on site to see whether they are complying with these firearms. But they are severely understaffed and under-resourced. And of course, we don't say that all your private security companies are taking advantage of it, but there are certainly some that do that.
Okay, so I mean, if I, Stephen Grootes, had to start, I don't know, we'd call it Stephen Grootes Security, I suppose, SGS would be able to go and get a license for the firearm. Who has the license for the automatic weapon? Would it be the security guard, or would it be the security company?
It will be the security company, but for you to be able to use and to be in possession of that firearm, even if you're working for this company, you have to do some competency tests. You are being graded, and you are also being certified in order to do so. So just with your as it is with your firearm, you have to do a competency test. You have to write your exam on your knowledge of the law, etc., etc. So the same with them. It is there. It is in place. But as I mentioned, is it being enforced? There is the question mark.
And then if, for example, you have one of these machine guns, a semi-automatic weapon or whatever we call it, I know with a normal handgun, if I were to possess one, I don't, I would have to have a car safe for it to transport it. I would have to keep it in a safe at home. With these guns, and we see so many security companies with them, are they supposed to remain in the custody of the security company overnight? Can they go home with the guard? Would the guard be expected to have a safe at home for it?
Depending on, once again, your legislation or your permit that is being granted. But traditionally, those firearms, they need to be locked up in a certified safe. at a certified premises where the license has been issued to. But we also know that these companies, the people are working, with cash in transit, for instance, they've got certain routes where they are traveling, etc., etc. But of course, those regulations and those prescripts are within your licensing of your company, and that must be adhered to. Of course, all your companies are not going to get the same privileges under that legislation. For instance, if you just place car guards at car guards, or if you place guards at the shopping mall or something like that is just static there looking at, they're not even armed most of the time. But it depends on the grade of your security and what type of security you are providing.
We saw during the violence in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng in 2021, some private security companies were stopping people from entering certain areas. Now, they're doing that illegally. I realize it was a very difficult time. It would stand to reason, to me at least, that many of these security companies are not about security. They're being used for other things. Are people starting security companies just to get access to these weapons, for example?
Yeah. You refer back to 2021. It was a difficult time, and there are many people that would like to argue that if it were not for some of these private security companies that stepped in, it would have been more anarchy. But on the other hand, what we also saw is the abuse of the legislation and how the loopholes are being used. For instance, in the taxi industry, you got your taxi owners that then find they establish their own security company. Under that, they get their licensing for firearms. Now they got free access to firearms, and it is not sure whether they always apply those firearms in the line of which it was issued for, or whether they use it also extrajudicially.
So how would we resolve that? You made the point, you said the legislation is fine. This is about the regulation. CIRA, as you say, needs more resources. Where does their funding come from? Does it come from government? Do the security companies pay for their own regulation? I presume they must pay fees to CIRA to be properly regulated, to be properly administered.
Yeah, they do pay their fees, but obviously it is a government body, and that body must be funded from government. They do get some funding, but according to our information, like I mentioned, they are severely undershort. There is a severe shortage of inspectors, for instance, to go out and visit as per the prescripts of the law to inspect the sites. That became with the incident where the Libyans were at the training camp in Mpumalanga. It came to the fore that the inspections were not what it's supposed to be, and the oversight was not what it's supposed to be, and mainly due to underfunding and under-resources of CIRA.
Willem Els, thank you very much indeed. Senior Coordinator at the Institute for Security Studies. Really do appreciate the time.